Hello! Today we have another ExpressLRS system, and you know what? I just can't get enough of them. I think it's one of the most exciting things to happen in the hobby for years and years. Suddenly we have low-cost, open-source hardware that works any to any. It's low latency, it's massive range, it's fantastic. I love it. Today we are looking at this new module from RadioMaster. It's called the Ranger. Quite interesting features on this one, and quite a different looking module. Let's get it out of the box and I'll show you what we're dealing with. And this is the main module itself. You'll notice it's got quite a large OLED screen here. You've got a 5-way joystick, i.e. you can move it and press it in. These are shortcut buttons. You've got what's described as like an advanced cooling system, because this can go all the way up to 1 watt, and this whole thing is metal. So I think that whole thing sort of works as a cooling thing in itself. It's quite substantial, it's quite heavy feeling, and it's quite large compared to other things. The other really interesting thing about it is if you look on the back, now you probably can't see this very well in this picture because it's black on black, you've just got some holes here. So if you're wondering, oh, what sort of radio is this for? Because you might have a nano bay. This is the RadioMaster Zorro, and it's got one of these little bays here. Do you see the little pins just there? Or you might have the full-size JR style bay, which this is on the RadioMaster TX12. You see you've got the pins in there. This is like if you've got the old Tyrannus, you'd have one of these. What does it fit? Normally you have a module which fits one or a module that fits the other. This module fits both, because further in the box you have these two little bags. And if we take these out of the bag, you'll see what we get are these little adapter plates. So the module screws in to either one of these, and then it either fits in your JR module or it fits in your little nano module, and you've got the best of both worlds. Now, I guess that makes the module overall slightly bigger than it might be if it was like a dedicated nano module or something like that, but you don't have to think about it, you can change it over, whatever, so I think that's quite cool. Also in the box, you've got some screws, screw it in, and this sort of servo tube thingy, little JST thing, which I would guess goes into here. At the bottom of this thing here, you see you've got XT30 for power, USB-C, and that sort of JST thing that does something or other, I'm not sure what yet. Another cool thing about this is it has 2 antennas that come with it. You've got your T antenna, which is quite nice as a sort of omni. The only thing you've got to think about is if you're vertically or horizontally polarized. And you've got your more directional mini Moxon antenna. So depending on what you want sort of overall, if you're going to fly behind yourself a load and do stuff, then this is great. If you're going to fly far out but mostly in front of you and not too far behind, then this will give you better range and better reception. As I said, it goes all the way up to 1 watt. You probably won't need that, but it's there if you need it. And it can run up to 1000 Hertz using the new F1000 system in V3. It's of course got Wi-Fi enabled, so you can do updates that way. It's got Bluetooth, so you can use it as a Bluetooth joystick. It supports the backpack functionality, so if you have a backpack installed on your goggles and then you change your channel via your radio, that can update your goggles. I went through a video in the past about that one. It's also got a free access accelerometer in there, and I thought, well, what's that for? And at the moment, the idea is if you put your radio down, then it's like, oh, I've been put down, I'll turn my screen off. But this could be used for different things in the future, depending what they develop and what happens. So let's find out what this is running, because I may have to update it. I certainly need to change it so it's the right bind phrase. And let's put it in a radio and see what's available on the screen here and see how it works and stuff like that.
Okay, well the current firmware it's running is unknown, and this because this is not released yet. When this does actually come out, I'd expect to have this on the ExpressLRS configurator. From my point of view, what I'm going to need to do is update my binding phrase through this, and I can update this via this file that RadioMaster gave me, which should update me to 301. So let's just make sure that loads okay. Okay, we've gone and updated, and we can see that the version's changed. It's still version unknown because this is not official firmware yet. And there's a couple of things I notice here, and one of them is the buttons. So we have got sort of user button things. As mentioned, we've got these shortcuts and we can do things to them. We can allocate them colours. Let's have a blue one. Oh, it's a bit pukey blue, isn't it? That's light blue. And let's have sort of a red one. So, what can we do with them? Well, this is interesting. So you can go to VTX, you can increase the power. Well, I'll pop them in there just for fun. See what happens. And you can do things like a long press, short press, which is quite interesting. So maybe I'll have a start Wi-Fi with a long press of the second button or something like that. Okay. And then we've got the general options here, and what I'm going to do is just put in my binding phrase and then save and reboot that, and then we'll have a look at the radio in a bit more detail, or the module in fact in a bit more detail, see what it can do.
Okay, so let's take a proper look at the module, and first thing I will do is switch it on, and I have got it set to the model which will use this. And the first thing you notice, even on these lights, is you've got this multicoloured LED strip, as well as those two lights I just set up. And since that time I showed you the update of the last firmware, we've got a new firmware which is labelled Experimental from RadioMaster. And there it is, all plugged in, and it's all kind of normal. I've set this up on for my Aquila quad, which is what I normally sort of range test with, because it, you know, it can go quite far, it's got a GPS. And it's all the same stuff really, so if we go into system and we run the version 3 ExpressLRS wizard, there's nothing particularly new here. It's all the normal gubbins on it, all the stuff down there. That's the experimental version of firmware, and we can change all our settings through here as per normal. Change that to 50 megabits and go back, and we've got some fan thresholds as well for the cooling. Come out of that, and we should see that's reflected there. And as I said, I set this button up so a quick press will increase the power and go the way through, and I think this star means that it's not set like that, it's going to go back. As I go up to the higher, let's put it back up, if we go back up now to a high power, you can just hear the fan coming on there. Can't really see it, but you can hear it. And as mentioned before, I did a full press here, and that would put it into Wi-Fi update mode. That was more of a thing to see what the button did. I don't think it's particularly useful doing that, and I don't know what I would do for them yet. Maybe the increase in power, or maybe something else. I don't know yet. See if there's anything else that come out which will support this. Now, obviously you've got the Lua script. You've also got, as you can see, this OLED screen, and if you do a long press on this button, you can go in and do changes. You've got packet rates, VTX admin, Wi-Fi admin, bind mode, Bluetooth, joypad, motion detect. Motion detect, I think this is about turning this off. At the moment I've got it set to off. Let's set it to on and see what happens, and then come out of that. And the idea is, if this is still, if we were to put it down, it should turn itself off. Now, I've zero idea how long that would take to actually go off, and if that's even the thing, because documentation is not really there yet, but I think that is the idea of motion detection. The little lights here seem to do some things, like if you're connecting to Wi-Fi, it sort of flashes and things. Again, at the moment there's no documentation to say what these say, or if you can then, perhaps in the future there'll be, so you can, you know, do things with them depending on what you're doing. But yeah, that's it all attached and good to go there. I am going to go out and fly something with it, essentially, because I think we've seen all the other features. We've seen, you know, being able to use Bluetooth joystick and stuff like that. One thing I want to do with this is, at the moment I've got it on 50 megahertz. What I normally do is fly 100 megahertz at a speed of 150 hertz. I think I'm going to do that and then try increasing the power, and I'm also going to have a go at flying with this and the Mini Moxon to see what the difference is, which I think might be quite interesting. And apparently I need to charge my radio before I do that, because the transmitter battery is low. Did you hear? Also worth mentioning that if you've got something like the TX12, then these antennas for the Ranger module are also RPS SMA, so you can use these as well. I know these are going to be sold separately, as well as this module and two of the other ones. I'll come to that later, but that is a quick way of upgrading your antenna on the TX12 without using any adapters. Hello friends, here we are in the field, ready to test the Ranger ELRS module. And you know, I haven't been flying for, I think, close to a month, between me having stuff done in the house, which didn't let me out, and then the last few weeks really bad weather. It's been tough. We had a forecast today of light stroke gentle winds, you know, up to 6-7 miles an hour. It's now sort of more like 17 to 20 miles an hour. This is not usually too much of a problem on a quad, but with this sort of module, what I like to do is fly out, you know, about 1 kilometre, look to see what sort of signal we get, and then come back again. And I generally do that with this little quad, which is a bit light, and the wind is annoyingly flying that way. And of course, whenever you're doing any distance, ideally you want to be wind assisted on the back. So if you got like to half battery, you know you can get back again. With this, I'm going to have to be quite careful and make sure I can get back, but you know, let's give it a go. Yeah, so I'm going to start off flying at, I think I'll get there quite quickly, it's coming back. I'll be flying at 100 milliwatts using the T antenna first, and then I'm going to bump the power up if I get back and check that out, and then I'll move over to the mini Moxon and see if there's a difference there. I expect it's all going to be strong. At 100 milliwatts you can go an awful long way, but I'm interested to see the difference in the T antenna and the difference in upping the power if we do it. So if we don't blow away first, let's get flying, see what happens.
Okay, so let's get flying. We're using the T antenna and we're starting off with 100 milliwatts. And as we get going, you will notice the speed increase. What I'm doing here, I'm just turning around, just making sure I can get back okay. What I didn't really take into account, of course, is as you get higher up, often you will get stronger winds. So although it's like, oh yeah, 50 kilometers, 60 kilometers an hour, as soon as I get some height, and you can see my throttle is only sort of 30%, we're getting up in the high 90s. And that's, you know, not particularly a problem. It's not particularly fast for a regular quad. This quad it works best on very light cruising. I normally fly this on little 850 milliamp 4S batteries, and flew carefully, it can last sort of 10 minutes. This is a 1300, and I'm worried already about this coming back. Anyway, if we look at our LQ and our dBm value here, this is what I'm keeping a sort of track on to try and figure it out. Looks like we're at about minus 87 on the turn, and as we do the turn we get the worst case minus 96 with an LQ of 98. So that's fairly good. I was fairly impressed with this T antenna actually. Now the getting back part, which is what worried me, in retrospect it's not too bad. I was just really worried because as soon as it starts, you know, getting into 14 point something and I seem to be crawling back, I'm like, uh-oh, am I going to make this? Because as I said, this is pretty efficient little quad when you treat it very gently, but as soon as you just up the throttle just a little bit, it seems to take more amps, and the batteries seem to drain very quickly. Perhaps long term I need something a bit different for doing this sort of test with. I need something that I'm confident can stay up, you know, 10 minutes in any conditions, no matter what I do with the throttle and what the wind is like. That would be, I think, more appropriate. Anyway, I have to say I was panicking a bit here because we're down to 14.6. We still got half a kilometre to go. Is it going to make it all the way? And the answer is yes. It depends on your battery. Sometimes things can, you know, drop very quickly from this sort of area. On this sort of quad, it kind of hangs around for a little while there. But anyway, we just about got back. But the other thing I wanted to check was what it's like to fly behind myself. Now I've only got about between 100 and 200 meters behind me, but I thought it's quite a good test to compare with, because obviously the T antenna is an omnidirectional antenna and it should give a pretty good signal behind myself as well, whereas the Mini Moxon should be worse. So what I try and do here is record the minimum dBm value in the turn to see how bad it gets, and you can see there the worst it gets is like minus 87, I think that was. So yep, that's pretty good, and I flew this battery off and then went for the next one. Up to 1000 milliwatts now, and I've never seen a dBm value of minus 20 before. That is the strongest signal I've ever seen, which is interesting to say the least. So I'm off to do the same thing, but I didn't realise one thing, and I'll come to that in a second, and I'll explain why we do a very sudden turn. So we're flying out again, and once again we're up over 100 kilometers an hour, which is kind of crazy in this quad, which just isn't used to that. And as we're going out here again, we seem to have a stronger signal by, I'd say, somewhere around 10 dBm about when I look at the two videos together. I think as we come up to turn and we do a turn here, we're at -79 and going worst -83. Now, just to explain, I would have gone a bit further there because, you know, the signal is so strong. However, what I just got in my ear is transmitter battery low, and then it starts repeating transmitter battery low all the way down. And what has happened is the not very good 18650s I'm using don't like the extra pull of electricity that the 1000 milliwatts is causing, and basically it's like the battery is just sagging relentlessly, and so we got to get this one down quickly. Fortunately, we did get it down pretty quickly because I didn't want it going into rescue mode and becoming a missile, so we got this down and looked at the problem. Well, we went down earlier than thought there because of the transmitter battery beeping, and I guess that is the problem running 1000 milliwatts if you're using particularly crappy 18650s. Fortunately, what I've got is a power bank which I've plugged in to carry on with, and that's the voltage is recovered. But get yourself decent 18650s and you won't have this problem. I should point out I actually bought the power bank in case my GoPro ran out of battery, which it manages to do occasionally, but just fortunately that also uses USB-C, so that was okay. So we're on the mini Moxon now and back to 100 milliwatts, and as soon as I put the power back to normal, the voltage recovered, and obviously now running it from the USB we haven't got a problem. I do notice I'm getting a particularly bad signal on the VTX here, a lot of noise. This is normally very clean. There is a lot of moisture in the air, and we've got a couple of drops of rain coming down, and I think that's contributing to this sort of problem. We absolutely don't like rain in 5.8. Anyway, off again, and I'm using a 1300, which I don't particularly like, so I think we're going to do a quite quick turn. Now on this one we're -88 on the turn, down to -91 at the worst, with an LQ of 99, which is it's slightly worse going into the turn and then slightly better when we hit the null, comparing it to the T antenna. So quite similar really, that one. So as we come back from that and fly behind ourselves, I expected this to drop down quite a lot, even though, you know, we're not going too far behind. We are going behind ourselves with a directional antenna, but it's not actually too bad. Our worst point here is -88. We drop a couple of points of LQ, but it is nothing too serious. It's certainly worse than the T antenna, but it doesn't mean you can't go behind yourself at all with the Moxon. You know, it's good for a couple of 100 meters. And finally we've got the mini Moxon on the 1 watt, and I do notice that at -27 the signal when we're very close in seems stronger on the T antenna, which I thought was quite interesting, because I always think of the directional antennas as being stronger when they're pointed in the right direction. But in this case I've been really very impressed in what the T antenna can do. So I went ahead and flew a little bit further on, and this is because I had an 1800 battery. This is the biggest battery I fly in this thing, and that it is higher C rating as well, so it gives me a lot more confidence that it's going to be okay. So on the turn here we turned at -79 and it went as bad as -86. I did not see the LQ do anything at all, which is, you know, better than the T at 100, but not necessarily better than the T at 1000, which I found quite interesting. But again, this is not exactly scientific. It's more sort of like this, you know, here's a video, see what's happening. When we hit nulls, different antennas work in different ways, of course. And as we come back into the field, let's see how it goes behind myself. I didn't get much difference between all the antennas here. We got a fairly good signal on all, and I kind of expect at 1000 milliwatts it to do okay. And -86 when we're doing a turn, so we've got the null versus being behind ourselves, and the worst we got was -86, is pretty damn good really. It's very hard to get a drop in this. I'm going to have to fly a lot further out to really do anything with this, or go into a really nasty RF area.
Well, you know, if I'm honest, I don't remember what the RSSI and the link quality looked like that much, because I was so panicked about getting back in this wind. Especially on, I had some smaller 1300 batteries and they were dropping in the like 14.5s coming back, although they all seem to last. So I don't remember any big drops. Certainly at 1000 milliwatts it was ridiculous, and even going behind myself I couldn't get any drops. So it looks pretty good, but I don't know. I'm gonna go back to the office and have a proper look at the DVR and see what conclusions we can come to, apart from don't fly in weather like this unless you're an idiot. Well, I have to say, this module felt very good to me. How good was it though? Am I just imagining it? Do I have confirmation bias about how good it is? So I thought I'd go back and just check the footage that I did with my RadioMaster TX12 Mark II with its standard antenna, using its internal ELRS module. And what I found out there is, on the turn, in a similar set of circumstances, we went into the turn at -91, we had the worst part of the turn at -101, and our LQ dropped to 60. And again, that's a different antenna, but it just sort of shows I wasn't imagining the sort of reception I was getting, which was very good. Now, you guys might be asking, well, several questions, one of which is like, why on earth would you ever need to go to 1000 milliwatts, a 1 watt system like this one? As you saw, it worked absolutely brilliantly at 100 milliwatts, and we definitely didn't need to up it. So the only reasons you might want to go there is, you know, you're FPVing to the moon or a very long distance, but that's the obvious one. The slightly less obvious one is you're in a very tricky RF environment, and it could be that you've literally got different RF emitters around you which is causing a problem, or you're low and sort of going through buildings or solid stuff where you're going to have a problem getting the signal there. Of course, you're probably going to have a problem with your video signal as well. So tough RF environments are one thing where you might want to up your power. Normally, if you're flying where I am, sort of over farmland and general area, you could go for forever on 100 milliwatts. The only reason I have to turn around is the battery runs out, essentially. But it's always good to have it just in case you need it. Now, this is the all singing, all dancing, super duper lovely module, and it is very nice. And I like touching it because it's nice CNC aluminium, and that helps it keep cool. And there were absolutely no problems of overheating. There was a problem, of course, with the batteries, and that is mainly down to these awful things. Don't buy cheap like I did. These are called Ultrafire. Don't ever buy them. They pretend to be, it's like, oh yeah, our capacity is 9,900 milliamp hours. I don't think so. I don't think so at all. So they will run fine, but as soon as there's extra demands on the power, they sag like a bad battery, essentially. So if you're going to do something, and this one takes several batteries, so it could have a decent 2S. I think the other ones were 21700s you could put in. And if you're going to want 18650, something like this, this is a Sony VT6 cell, which are really good and have a much higher C rating than the crappy ones, and actually are 3000 milliamp hours and don't pretend to be something they're not. But you do have the option there of plugging in an XT30 or USB-C if you want to pair it off something else. I was kind of blown away by this little T antenna. I thought it was all going to be about the Moxon. But the sort of general flying that I'm doing, this probably covers it 99.9%, because not only could I go a long distance in front of me, I could also go out the back of me, round the side, do whatever I wanted to. There are still null points, of course, and there to the null point of the antenna on the quad would give a bad reception. So if I'm flying exactly over there at a distance with the two nulls facing each other, it's going to give a bad reception, but it's going to give a worse reception on that. But I like the fact you get a choice of both. So if you're going to go ultra distance, get your directional antenna. If you want to fly all around yourself doing, you know, bandos or freestyle or whatever, T antenna is absolutely great. Now, should you not want the all singing, all dancing one, if for some reason you don't like these lovely LED strips and the light up shortcut buttons and the OLED screen and the joystick and stuff, RadioMaster do actually do other modules. So whereas this is all singing, all dancing and can fit both the Nano and JR Bay, it is about $99, but for $39.99 you could have either the Nano or the JR specific module. Now that loses a couple of things. You don't get the screen, you don't get shortcut buttons, you don't get the exciting light up stuff, and you only get the T antenna with it, but it still goes up to 1 watt, it can still do 1000 Hertz, so they're well worth looking at if you're like, well, I know I'm not gonna ever use like the Nano, and I don't need something this big, and I'm not impressed by the lights or the OLED screen. Shame on you. But yeah, these options are available as well, but I like this one. This can be my daily driver from now on, and I especially like this T antenna, which you can get individually, by the way. You can get both of these. So if you're, you know, already got something like a TX12, you're like, well, I've got an internal thing, you can always get a better antenna for it to put in there now, which is quite cool. Anyway, this has been the RadioMaster Ranger ExpressLRS module, kindly supplied by RadioMaster Test. Thank you very much indeed for sending it over. It was great fun to test out. Now you'll notice this video is a bit later than some other people's videos, and that's because I always like to fly things as well. There's nothing wrong with doing a bench review, but for me, I don't really get a sense of it until I fly it, so I'm later than other people, but that's just me. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful. I'll be flying this some more, and I will catch you in later videos soon. Take it easy. See you in the next video. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.